Sometimes the most powerful lessons are taught not in classrooms, but in moments when the whole world becomes your student. That's what 82-year-old Harold Washington proved when he stood at the Family Feud podium. His hands trembling with Parkinson's disease, but his voice steady with 50 years of wisdom, and gave an answer that stopped Steve Harvey's heart and reminded an entire television studio what it truly means to educate, inspire, and change lives forever. The morning had started early for Harold Washington, as mornings always did when your body no longer cooperated with your mind's desires. In his small apartment on the south side of Chicago, Harold sat at his kitchen table, slowly sipping coffee from a mug that read "World's Greatest Teacher," a gift from the Lincoln Elementary School class of 1987, one of the 43 graduating classes he had guided through their formative years during his 5-decade career in education. Harold's hands shook slightly as he held the mug, a visible reminder of the Parkinson's disease that had been gradually stealing pieces of his physical independence over the past 3 years. But his dark eyes remained sharp and alert, the same eyes that had watched thousands of children grow from uncertain first graders into confident young people ready to take on the world. At 82, Harold's body was failing him, but his mind remained as keen as it had been during his first day of teaching in 1963. Today was different from his usual routine of reading, watching educational programs, and corresponding with former students who had stayed in touch over the years. Today, Harold was preparing for something he had never imagined would happen in his retirement, appearing on Family Feud with some of the students whose lives he had shaped decades ago. The idea had originated with Harold Washington, had begun his teaching career in September 1963, fresh out of Chicago State University, with an education degree and idealistic dreams about changing the world one student at a time. He had been assigned to Lincoln Elementary School on the city's south side, a building that was already showing its age and serving a community struggling with poverty and limited resources. His first classroom had been a converted storage room in the basement. With no windows and inadequate heating, Harold had spent his first paycheck on space heaters, his second on art supplies, and his third on books for a classroom library. It became a pattern that would define his career, Harold investing his own modest resources in other people's children. The 1960s had been a turbulent time to begin teaching in Chicago's inner-city schools. The civil rights movement was reshaping society, and schools like Lincoln Elementary were often overlooked by administrators. But Harold had thrived, seeing opportunity where others saw only obstacles. His teaching philosophy had been shaped by his own childhood as the son of a domestic worker and factory laborer who had impressed upon him that education was the one ladder that nobody can take away from you. Harold had arrived at Lincoln Elementary with deep understanding of education's transformative power and unshakable belief that every child deserved excellence regardless of circumstances. Harold learned to teach students who came to school hungry, whose families moved frequently due to evictions, who arrived at age 6, convinced that school wasn't for people like them. He learned to recognize signs of trauma and to create classroom environments where learning could happen despite chaos many students faced at home. Marcus Johnson had been one of Harold's most memorable early students, arriving in 3rd grade as an angry defensive child whose academic skills were far below grade level. Marcus's single mother worked multiple jobs, leaving him to care for younger siblings and get himself to school most mornings. Harold had recognized the intelligence behind Marcus's defiance and the fear behind his anger. Instead of punishment or lowered expectations, Harold had made Marcus his special project. He started arriving early to provide breakfast and homework help, arranged classroom responsibilities that built confidence, and maintained absolute faith in Marcus's potential even when his behavior suggested that faith was misplaced. The breakthrough came during career exploration, when Dr. Patricia Williams visited to discuss medicine. Marcus had been captivated, asking sophisticated questions. After she left, Marcus approached Harold with unusual vulnerability. "Do you really think someone like me could become a doctor?" Harold's response became legendary. "Marcus, the only thing standing between you and medical school is time and effort. The potential is already there." Angela Rodriguez had presented different challenges when she arrived in 1989. The daughter of recent immigrants from El Salvador, Angela spoke little English and had received limited formal education. Harold had immediately recognized her fierce intelligence and determination. Harold had purchased Spanish-English dictionaries and bilingual materials with his own money, learned basic Spanish phrases, and arranged for older bilingual students to serve as mentors. Most importantly, he refused to lower academic expectations because of language barriers, instead providing additional support needed to meet high standards. Michael Thompson had been referred to Harold in 2004 by parents who heard about his success with students who didn't fit traditional molds. Michael came from a stable family, but had ADHD and had struggled where teachers focused more on managing behavior than developing potential. Harold had researched learning differences and adapted his methods to accommodate Michael's needs for movement and hands-on learning. He had also recognized Michael's leadership abilities and given him opportunities to help other students, channeling energy in positive directions. Sarah Kim had been one of Harold's final students before retirement in 2013. The daughter of Korean immigrants, Sarah excelled academically but struggled socially and emotionally under tremendous pressure from high expectations and perfectionist tendencies. Harold had worked to create an environment where Sarah could experience both challenge and support, where mistakes were learning opportunities rather than failures, and where social and emotional development was valued alongside academic achievement. These four former students, Marcus, Angela, Michael, and Sarah, represented just a fraction of the lives Harold had touched over his 50-year career. Each decade had brought new challenges and new opportunities to plant seeds of hope. Now, 35 years later, Dr. Marcus Johnson wanted to honor the man who had changed the trajectory of his entire life. The Family Feud appearance was Marcus's idea, but he hadn't been the only former student eager to participate. The team assembled for the show represented different decades of Harold's teaching career. Marcus from the 1980s, Angela Rodriguez from the 1990s, Angela Rodriguez from the 1990s, now a successful attorney, Michael Thompson from the 2000s, a high school principal following in Harold's footsteps, and Sarah Kim from Harold's final years of teaching, a social worker who credited Harold with teaching her that education is about nurturing the whole child, not just filling minds with facts. The flight to Atlanta had been Harold's first time on an airplane in over a decade, and the experience had been both exciting and overwhelming for a man whose world had gradually shrunk as age and illness limited his mobility. Marcus had insisted on flying Harold first class, a luxury that the retired teacher found both touching and unnecessary. "You already gave me everything I needed," Harold had told Marcus during the flight. "You don't need to give me anything more." But Marcus understood something that Harold's modesty wouldn't let him acknowledge. The man sitting beside him had given far more than he had ever received. Harold Washington had spent 50 years investing in other people's children, often using his own modest salary to buy school supplies, winter coats, and even groceries for families who were struggling. He had attended countless graduations, weddings, and celebrations, always proud to see his former students succeed, but never seeking recognition for his role in their achievements. The preparation for Family Feud had been an exercise in reminiscence that both honored Harold's legacy and highlighted the progression of his Parkinson's symptoms. During practice sessions at Marcus's home, Harold's brilliant mind would produce perfect answers to survey questions, but his trembling hands made it difficult for him to operate a buzzer quickly. His speech, while still clear and articulate, had developed the slightly slowed cadence that often accompanies Parkinson's disease. But what struck everyone during the preparation was Harold's unchanged teaching instinct. When Sarah struggled with a particular category, Harold would gently guide her thinking with the same patient questioning technique he had used in classrooms for 5 decades. When Michael got frustrated with his buzzer timing, Harold reminded him that learning happens at different speeds for different people, and that's not a weakness, it's just human. The Family Feud production team had been briefed about Harold's condition, and they had made accommodations to ensure he could participate comfortably. But they had also been warned about something else. Harold Washington was reportedly one of the most beloved teachers in Chicago public schools history, and his former students were fierce in their devotion to the man who had shaped their lives. Steve Harvey's pre-show meeting with the Washington team was immediately different from his typical family introductions. Instead of meeting with relatives, Steve found himself facing 4 accomplished adults who shared no blood relationship, but were bound together by something deeper, their shared experience of having been loved, challenged, and believed in by an extraordinary educator. "Mr. Harvey," Marcus began, his voice carrying the respect and formality that Harold had instilled in all his students. "We want you to meet someone very special. This is Harold Washington, our teacher." Harold stood slowly from his chair, his movements careful and deliberate, but his handshake with Steve was firm, and his smile was radiant. "Mr. Harvey," he said, his voice carrying the authority and warmth that had commanded respect in classrooms for 50 years. "It's an honor to meet you. I've watched your show for years, and I admire how you treat families with such kindness and respect." Steve was immediately struck by Harold's presence, the way he listened intently to every word spoken around him, the way his former students unconsciously deferred to him despite being successful adults, the obvious love and respect that flowed between this elderly man and the people he had taught decades ago. "Mr. Washington," Steve replied, instinctively using the formal address that seemed appropriate for someone who had clearly been a commanding presence in his profession. "These folks tell me you were quite the teacher. How long did you work in education?" Harold's eyes lit up with the same passion that had sustained him through 50 years of challenges, budget cuts, changing curricula, and the countless obstacles that face urban educators. 50 years, he said, with obvious pride. "Kindergarten through 5th grade at Lincoln Elementary School on the South Side. Best job in the world." "And what made it the best job in the world?" Steve asked, genuinely curious about this soft-spoken man who had somehow inspired such devotion from his former students. Harold was quiet for a moment, his hands trembling slightly as he considered the question. When he spoke, his words carried the weight of 5 decades of experience and wisdom. "Because every day, I got to watch children discover that they were capable of more than they ever imagined. Every day, I got to plant seeds that might not bloom for years, but when they did," he gestured to Marcus, Angela, Michael, and Sarah, who were hanging on his every word, despite being accomplished adults. "When they did, the harvest was beautiful beyond description." Steve found himself unexpectedly moved by Harold's response and by the obvious reverence these successful adults had for their former teacher. There was a story here that went deeper than typical family relationships, a legacy that had been built one child at a time over 5 decades of dedicated service. The opposing family, the Martinez clan from Phoenix, were energetic and clearly excited to compete. But when they learned about Harold's background and saw the love and respect surrounding him, their competitive enthusiasm transformed into something more respectful. This wasn't just about winning a game show, this was about honoring someone who had dedicated his life to serving others. When Steve Harvey took the stage with his characteristic energy, the studio buzzed with its usual excitement. But there was an undercurrent of something different, a sense that this episode would be special because of the quiet dignity of the elderly man standing at the contestants' podium, surrounded by the adults whose lives he had shaped. The family introductions revealed the unique nature of Harold's team. Instead of traditional family relationships, Steve learned about teacher-student bonds that had lasted for decades, about a man who had attended his students' weddings and graduations long after they left his classroom, about former students who had named their children after the teacher who had believed in them when no one else would. "Mr. Washington," Steve said during the introductions, "I understand you taught for 50 years. That's half a century of shaping young minds. What's the secret to being a great teacher?" Harold looked out at the studio audience, then at the camera that would broadcast his words to millions of viewers, and his response carried the wisdom earned through decades of working with children who faced every possible challenge. "The secret," he said, his voice steady, despite his trembling hands, "is understanding that you're not just teaching subjects, you're teaching children to believe in themselves. You're teaching them that someone cares about their future. You're teaching them that education is the one thing nobody can ever take away from them." The studio applauded, but Harold wasn't finished. "And most importantly," he continued, "you're teaching them hope. Hope that tomorrow can be better than today. Hope that hard work leads to opportunities. Hope that they matter in this world." The game began with the familiar energy of Family Feud, but Harold's presence seemed to elevate the entire experience. During the first round, When the category was named something teachers always carry, Harold buzzed in with remarkable speed, despite his trembling hands, and confidently answered, "Hope for their students." It wasn't on the board, but his answer drew sustained applause from the audience. When it was Harold's turn to answer during the third round, Steve approached the podium with obvious respect for the elderly educator. The category was named something that gets better with age, and Harold's response was immediate and certain. "Wisdom," he said. It was the number one answer on the board. But it was during the fourth round that the moment everyone would remember forever finally arrived. The category was named something teachers give their students, and after several family members had provided conventional answers like homework, grades, and knowledge, it was Harold's turn. Steve walked over to Harold's position at the podium, microphone in hand, and addressed the man who had spent 50 years in classrooms with obvious respect. "Mr. Washington, we need something teachers give their students. What do you think?" Harold looked at Steve with eyes that had seen thousands of children grow and learn and succeed against incredible odds. He thought about Marcus, who had gone from a hungry third grader to a pediatrician. He thought about Angela, who had overcome language barriers to become a successful attorney. He thought about Michael, who was now inspiring his own students as a principal. He thought about Sarah, who was helping vulnerable children as a social worker. He thought about the thousands of other students whose faces filled his memory, whose successes had given meaning to his life's work. When Harold spoke, his voice was clear and strong, carrying across the studio with the authority that comes from absolute truth born of experience. "Hope," he said simply. The word hung in the air for a moment, and then something extraordinary happened. The studio fell completely silent, not the brief quiet of surprise, but the profound silence that comes when everyone present recognizes they have just heard something deeply true and important. Steve Harvey, a man who had made his career by knowing how to respond to any situation, found himself completely speechless. This wasn't just a game show answer about what teachers provide. This was a summation of 50 years of devoted service, a window into the heart of someone who had understood that education is about far more than academic instruction. "Hope," Steve repeated quietly, and then louder, "Hope." He set his microphone down on the podium and walked directly to where Harold stood. The cameras kept rolling, but everyone in the studio understood that they were witnessing something that transcended entertainment. "Mr. Washington," Steve said, his voice thick with emotion, "in all my years of hosting this show, I have never heard an answer that was more true or more important than what you just said." He positioned himself directly in front of Harold, looking into the eyes of a man who had dedicated his entire adult life to lifting up others. "You know what you just did? You just reminded everyone in this studio, everyone watching at home, what real teaching is about. It's not about curriculum or test scores or any of that bureaucratic stuff. It's about giving children the one thing that can carry them through anything life throws at them. It's about giving them hope." Steve turned to address the entire studio, his voice carrying the weight of absolute conviction. "Ladies and gentlemen, I want you to understand what we have here. This man standing right here spent 50 years, going into classrooms every day and telling children that they mattered, that their futures were bright, that education could change their lives. And look at the evidence." He gestured to Marcus, Angela, Michael, and Sarah, who were openly crying as they watched their beloved teacher being honored on national television. A doctor, a lawyer, a principal, a social worker, 4 successful adults who are here today because one teacher refused to give up on them. 4 people whose lives were changed because Harold Washington understood that the most important thing a teacher can give a student is hope for their future. The studio audience rose to their feet in spontaneous applause, but Steve raised his hand for quiet. "But that's not the most amazing part," he continued. "The most amazing part is that these 4 people represent just a tiny fraction of the lives this man has touched. 50 years of teaching, thousands of students. How many doctors, lawyers, teachers, business owners, parents, and community leaders are out there right now because Harold Washington gave them hope when they needed it most?" Steve walked back to Harold, who was standing quietly with tears streaming down his face, overwhelmed by the recognition and love being expressed for his life's work. "Mr. Washington, I want you to have something. Steve began removing his suit jacket, the same navy blue jacket that had become part of his television persona. As he draped it around Harold's shoulders, his voice carried the respect that one educator has for another. "This jacket has been with me through every episode I've ever hosted. It's seen families celebrate and struggle, win and lose. But today, it's going home with someone who spent 50 years teaching children to hope, to dream, to believe in themselves." Harold looked down at the jacket, then back up at Steve, his eyes bright with unshed tears. "Mr. Harvey," he said, his voice steady despite his emotion, "you honor me, but the real honor has been mine. I got to spend 50 years watching children become everything they were meant to be. I got to plant gardens of hope in young minds, and then watch those gardens bloom into beautiful lives." He looked out at Marcus, Angela, Michael, and Sarah, then at the studio audience, then at the cameras that would carry his words to millions of viewers. "If there are teachers watching tonight," Harold said, "I want them to know that what they do matters. Every day matters. Every child matters. Every moment you spend believing in a student's potential is a moment that can change the world." The studio erupted in the longest, most sustained applause in Family Feud history, but it wasn't just applause. It was recognition, gratitude, and respect for someone who had embodied the highest ideals of education and service. Steve turned to address the audience one final time. "Ladies and gentlemen, Harold Washington, 82 years old, 50 years in the classroom, thousands of lives changed, and still teaching all of us what hope looks like." The episode aired 6 weeks later and became not just the most watched Family Feud episode in the show's history, but a cultural phenomenon that sparked national conversations about education, the value of teachers, and the power of hope to transform lives. The response from viewers was unprecedented. Teachers from across the country wrote to share their own stories. Former students reached out to educators who had made differences in their lives decades earlier. School districts reported increases in volunteer applications and donations for classroom supplies. But perhaps most significantly, Harold Washington became an unexpected symbol for the teaching profession at a time when educators were facing unprecedented challenges. His simple answer, hope, became a rallying cry for teachers everywhere who understood that their real job was not just to educate minds, but to nurture souls and inspire dreams. Steve Harvey, who had built his career on entertaining families, learned something profound about the difference between momentary laughter and lasting impact. In interviews afterward, he said, "Mr. Washington taught me that some people don't just do jobs, they live callings. He reminded me that the most important work in the world is often the quietest." Harold used his portion of the winnings to establish a scholarship fund for students from Lincoln Elementary School who demonstrated academic improvement and commitment to helping others. But the real prize was something money couldn't buy: recognition that his life's work had been honored on a national stage. In the months following the episode, Harold received thousands of letters from viewers who had been moved by his story. Former students he hadn't heard from in decades reached out to express gratitude. Current teachers wrote to thank him for reminding the world why their profession matters. Harold Washington passed away peacefully 2 years after the Family Feud episode aired, surrounded by former students who had become his chosen family. At his memorial service, over 800 people gathered to honor the man who had given them hope. The service was held at Lincoln Elementary School, in the gymnasium where Harold had attended countless graduations over his 50-year career. Steve spoke at the memorial service, wearing the navy blue jacket that Harold had returned with a note, "Give this to another teacher who needs to remember that hope is the most important subject we teach." "Harold Washington taught me something I'll never forget," Steve told the gathered mourners. "He taught me that some people spend their whole lives accumulating wealth or fame or power, but Harold chose something different. He chose to accumulate hope. He collected hope in young hearts for 50 years, and then he planted it and watched it grow into beautiful lives." The Harold Washington Hope Scholarship continues to this day, funded by donations from former students and viewers moved by his story. The scholarship doesn't just provide financial assistance, it provides mentoring, support, and most importantly, hope for students who need someone to believe in their potential. Because sometimes the most powerful lessons really are taught, not in classrooms, but in moments when the whole world becomes your student. And sometimes, 82-year-old hands that shake with Parkinson's disease can still hold steady the most important thing a teacher can offer, the unwavering belief that every child deserves hope. Harold Washington proved that great teachers never really retire, they just find new ways to inspire, new audiences to reach, and new opportunities to plant seeds of hope. His legacy lives on not just in the successful lives of his former students, but in the countless viewers who were reminded that education is about more than facts and figures. It's about hope, belief, and the transformative power of someone caring enough to see potential where others see only problems. The last teacher had given his final lesson, and it was the most important one of all, that hope once planted in a young heart can grow into anything.